it's Ivy Slater, and you're listening to Her Success Story Podcast, a show where gutsy businesswomen share their success journey. Hi, it's Ivy Slater. Welcome to this episode of Her Success Story. So you're joining us while we're doing a series on the impact of women on boards. That's right, the impact of women on boards, women in the boardroom. We have an amazing guest today, Kelly Coyne. Let me tell you a little bit about Kelly, and I'm going to tell you briefly because she has so much to say. Kelly is Vice President of Global Women's Strategies, Impact Asset Management, and PAX Ellevate Management. Kelly, she's responsible for national sales, marketing initiatives related to PAX Ellevate Global Women's Leadership Fund. She also helps financial advisors build their practices, better engage, and serve the next generation of clients through the firm's Millennial and Money Management Initiative. I happen to know Kelly speaks all over the place on the impact on women on boards, and I'm fortunate, and we're all fortunate, to have Kelly join us for a short time today to share her perspective, and it's a perspective that we haven't really heard in this series yet. Kelly is a millennial, and we've had amazing interviews by women who've been closer to my generation, women who had seen the work we've put behind of women making a bigger impact. And I'm looking forward to Kelly sharing the perspective of the millennial generation and below, and where you see women today. So welcome, Kelly.
Ivy, thanks so much for having me. I'm excited.
So tell us, how did you get involved in all of this? How do you become vice president of PAX with Ellevate, et cetera? I mean, it's a substantial position. How did you fall into this?
Yeah, it's kind of a funny story, and one that involves, the power of networking. I will say that right after college, started in financial services at a big firm in Boston. And I actually joined Ellevate Network, which is a professional networking group for women across industries, across the globe. And it's owned by Sally Krawcheck. I became pretty good acquaintances and friends with a woman named Kathleen McQuiggan, who was the president of Ellevate Network in Boston. She actually worked for Impacts and was launching the PAX Ellevate Global Women's Leadership Fund, and said, "Hey, Kelly, I know that you work in financial services, and I also know that, as a millennial, you think you can change the world and you want to have impact and all of that." And she knew me well, to say the least. And she asked me actually 5 years ago this month if I would come on to be a product specialist. And I kid you not, I quit my job that day and jumped at the chance, obviously, to work on a fund like this one, and for someone like Sally Krawcheck. It was very exciting. So it was through Ellevate Network and really getting my name out there in the industry and meeting a lot of people and women and getting connected.
So I just want to jump in here for a second and really share a little bit about networking and the value of relationships. So I'm also a member of Ellevate Network, and we had the fortunate experience of interviewing Christy Wallace, who's the CEO, right? She's CEO, right?
Yes.
Of Ellevate today, and we were talking at the end of the interview, as I always talk with my guests, and we shoot the breeze a little bit, and one of my key questions is, so, who else do you have who should be on Her Success Story? And she's like, great, tell me what her success story is up to in the next few months. And I said, well, we're going to be starting a series on the impact of women on boards. And she jumped right in, and she's like, you need to talk to Kelly, and here's a connection. So the importance of networks and building your networks, and how women also, I must say as a side note to today, how women also stand and give to each other.
I totally agree. And I have to say, Sally, if, any of the listeners do not follow her on social media platforms yet, I highly suggest that you do. Her famous line is, networking is the number one, unwritten rule of business. And it's not going to be, your best friend that opens a door for you and gets, your next job or next promotion. It's going to be someone that's, more loosely connected to you. And by nature, we think the guys might have a better or more easier time of networking than sometimes we do. And so that's been really ingrained in me since working with her, is to meet everybody you can, to really spend quality time with people you can. And then obviously for us women in the business, who are few and far between, help pull each other up and make space at the table for everybody.
So Kelly, let me ask you this. So you said yes 5 years ago.
Right.
Okay. And very often when we say yes, we have no idea what we're saying yes to.
Right.
So share a little bit of your journey. And, you represent funds where, and I don't want to get the statistics wrong, so I want the statistics to come from you, but share a premise of why this is important. And they take a stand for the impact of women on boards, women in C-suite, women in significant positions in companies. Share a little bit more about what this is about out there and why it's important to you.
Sure. I have to say, when I heard that the fund that they wanted me to come in and be a specialist on was called the Global Women's Leadership Fund, I have to say, I'm thinking companies with pink logos or, like just the Lululemons of the world or something. I wasn't sure exactly what they meant by that, to be quite honest. I don't think a lot of people nowadays, I work with financial advisors, they know exactly what I'm talking about either, until we really talk about, what diverse leadership looks like and where we're trying to go and what companies are doing it well. But for me as a millennial, I'm 30 years old. So when I started at PAX Ellevate, I was 25, and I didn't actually know that there weren't, women well represented on boards at Fortune 500 companies. I mean, I just assumed, right? And especially now, it's 2019, most of my peers and, my age assume that of course there are women, well represented on the board, potentially maybe not in the C-suite. I think that's a little bit more public knowledge that that's usually the middle-aged white man in those seats, but definitely through executive management, managing directors and so on. But when you look at the research and you look at the data, we're very, underrepresented, and not just at Fortune 500 companies and not just at the C-suite, but, across the globe, in the board seats. And, of course, again, that next level down in management as well. And I think it was a little bit of a surprise to me learning about that. I went to an all-girls school in high school, and, I just, had no question that we can do anything and change the world and have an impact, and no fear that we shouldn't be well represented in these spots. And so it was interesting, to say the least, to get up to speed on, the depressing numbers around where we stand, or where we sit for that matter, and then say, wow, like this is something that I get to talk about as part of my job every day. I have the coolest job ever, to be, essentially telling the business case of why it makes sense to have diverse leadership teams, why these companies perform better, where we stand today. And, investing in companies that get it right is actually a great opportunity. So, that's my day job, and it's fun.
So I'm sitting and scribbling as I hear you speak, with so much to ask. First, can you share a little bit about the numbers? Okay, because I always believe numbers tell a story. So I think it's important to understand the story here. So what I'm usually talking about are global averages. And so in the fund that I work on, we invest in the top 400 companies out of 1,600. And it's actually we're using the pool of companies that's in the MSCI World Index. So there's 1,600 large cap names. So think, Microsoft, eBay, Amazon, all the largest companies in the world. We take the 1,600, and when you look at that, only 19% of women are represented in management across those 1,600 names, and only 26% are in the board seats. And those numbers have gone up, I will tell you, over the last 5 years. Small, maybe between 1% and 5%.
But what we're trying to say is, okay, what are the companies that are doing it, best and have the best representation? So when you compare that to the fund, that we're talking about, it's over 30% of management teams have women in those roles. And then we're actually closer to 40% of women holding the board seats of the fund, in the fund. And we're saying those are the leaders, right? The 400 top leaders. And the reason that, we've created this and that we're talking about this isn't just because this is nice. This isn't, let's just try to make it fair. It's not a charity. We're actually been studying research, and there's, I want to say, over 60, probably 70 reports now that we cite alone that talks about when you have women well represented in these roles and you have diverse teams, how much better those companies perform. And so as investors.
Right. I want to jump in here because I want to be really clear on this. This isn't about doing the right thing demographically. This is not about, hey, women need to be in these seats. It's important that women have roles, this, that, and the other thing. And I'm not saying that's not important.
Right.
But we're looking at the true numbers. What are the results of when this happens? When we have, 3 or more? Am I right there, or you tell me?
Yeah, I mean, we certainly hope to see 3 or more. Sometimes I get the question like, oh, you're looking for 50-50. I'm like, we'd have no companies to invest in if that's what we were trying, aiming for. Of course, we want to see that. But there's research that just looks at, 2 groups of companies, those that have 0 women on their boards and those that have at least 1 or more. And, over a 10-year period, Credit Suisse does a lot of this research. The results are very conclusive. Good things happen. Where there's been more research, and exactly what you just said, Ivy, is when there's 3 or more, or sometimes 30%. It's sort of a tipping point of where you see the most positive business results occur at those companies. When it's not just 1 woman or even 2 women, but typically, you have somewhat of a base that you see a lot of things change. There's even a study that talks about how the guys that came to the board meeting when there were 3 or more women on the board had read all the board materials. Previously, they had not, when it was just a group of guys. So it gets really specific. That one's a little funny, but, Harvard has an amazing study that we talk about a lot that actually had, 2 controlled groups, one that had a much higher IQ, all more of the same. So white men of similar age, and they compared that with a more diverse group, both gender and other kinds of diversity, with all lower IQs. And what they found is hand over foot that the diverse teams outperformed the teams, that were non-diverse, and ran into groupthink. And their conclusion was diverse teams outperform smarter teams. And that's the power of diversity. And so it's not nice. It's simply very smart to do.
So when we talk about outperforming, what does that mean?
So we're talking about, both the quantitative and qualitative side of things. So we're looking, at companies when they have diverse teams in place. And again, mainly speaking about board and senior management, the results are finding that they have greater client focus, greater long-term focus, higher employee retention, greater productivity, but then also, the numbers are there too. So there, like I said, so many studies that look at, U.S. companies, global companies, large cap, smaller and so forth, but a vast, amount of companies and research has been done that's also saying these companies are operating with lower risk, and they have higher return on equity, higher return on invested capital, lower debt equity ratios, you name it. Those kind of more quantitative business results are there too. They're more profitable companies. McKinsey does a lot of work, looking at profitability and so forth. And so what's funny is we've actually tried to find research that points in the opposite direction, and we can't really find it. It's incredibly conclusive at this point, and something, like I said, that for now, since not all companies are getting it, it's just a really good opportunity for investors.
So you're out there, you're a VP and you're in a sales role. Mm-hmm. So you're interacting with an enormous amount of financial advisors and people in finance. Am I right there?
Exactly. Yep.
Okay. So, overall, what is their response, their curiosity? Are they shocked? Are they all in? Give us a little bit of this insight, because I would love to just travel with you for a day and actually watch their responses.
Do it. Yeah, we can do that. I have to say it's been a big shift over the 5 years. It was quite the uphill battle when I started. No one, for the most part, was just automatically buying into this business case, buying in that this was smart, oh, this is a marketing play. Oh, this is just kind of niche-y, and my clients would never be interested in something like this. I got that response all the time. I actually had one advisor compare this to affirmative action and say we were just trying to get women who weren't qualified on boards. I mean, I've heard it all. And, I'm not going to say I'm speaking to a diverse group that, and a lot of women, I'm speaking to 85% older white men. I'm working with financial advisors, and 85 is probably generous, it's probably higher. And so, convincing, financial professionals, these older white guys typically, that this was a really smart strategy and that they should think about this, and they, think about not just investing in women, but impact investing more broadly. It took a little bit of time. I have to say in the last 2 years, I'm happy to report that, it almost takes no time to get someone and still the older white male advisor to nod along and say, yeah, this is interesting. And I know I have clients that would like this, and it's not every client by any means, but I think that there's been a huge shift in not just the interest towards impact investing, which is, kind of investing alongside your values or considering the impact your portfolio is going to have, because I like to say all investments make an impact, right? It's just which one do you want yours to make? But I think with what's happening in our society, like I'm talking all the way back to Lean In, with Sheryl Sandberg, but Me Too, Time's Up, the reaction after Trump getting elected, it has been, gender equality is at the forefront. And people want to talk about this. I have to honestly turn down events to go speak at advisor client events because, everybody wants to talk about this now, and it's crazy. And there's just, only one of me, but it's great to see. It's really, it's encouraging. I have to say, there's a lot more money going in this direction and a lot more interest in the last 2 years than the last 3 before that.
So, what has surprised you about this journey that you ended up on?
Yeah, that's interesting. I actually didn't think it would be as hard as it was probably at the start. I don't know why. Maybe I was just naive because I got it, and I figured it was smart. But it's a lot of education in this space. So it's not just, the fund we have performs well, and, there shouldn't be necessarily a lot of reasons that someone would say, oh, definitely not, right? But when you're talking about something that's newer and that's something that they haven't done, and especially in financial services where everybody just wants to do what they've always done, whether that's, how they're invested, how they work with clients, making change is hard. And I think that for many people and many of our clients, this was a new type of investment that they would consider and think about. And so instead of maybe 1 or 2 meetings where you would talk about a product, an advisor might use it, it's more probably 5 or 6, and a lot of education to talk about the business case, as I mentioned, a lot of that research, but then also how to bring it up, how to introduce this to clients, how can they measure the impact that you're having? That's a question I get a lot. And we do a lot of shareholder sort of engagement and advocacy on issues like pay equity and board diversity, of course. And so they want to know the results, what have you done? And so I would say the sales cycle for me is definitely much longer than it had been at previous firms that I worked at. And that was probably the largest surprise. But then when you got someone on the hook and they were all in, I've never seen people more passionate about a mutual fund, right? So, it's worth it in the long run.
Doing what I do out there, of course, I'm connected to a lot of financial planners and financial advisors, and I know there's associations involved around women in financial services, etc. Do you see, and is there any I'm just curious. I'm coming from 100 place of curiosity. Women financial advisors versus men financial advisors. Clearly, yes, there's much more men, but do you see in the investment and when you're approaching men and women, do they have the same questions? Are they coming from any different places or the same perspective of the information they want to know?
That's interesting. I would say I probably don't have a lot of information on that, only because rarely am I meeting with the end investor. But when I hear back from advisors, when they bring it up and what the questions they're getting is, obviously a lot of women are interested, more women are interested in making an impact with their investments, aligning their portfolio with values and so on. I think it's over 65% of women, but, it's over 50% of men as well. So it's not certainly just women. What's fun is actually seeing, men with daughters, especially around the topic that I'm talking about, get all excited, over something like this. And when you say, these are the companies your daughters are going to work at, do you want them to value women in leadership roles, or, is it just going to keep the glass ceiling forever? I think that the two biggest themes in impact investing are definitely gender equality and climate change. Naturally, we see more women towards the gender equality side, but I think that it's definitely the guys too. It's a lot of family conversations. I don't know if you've seen this, Ivy, but with talking about this generational wealth transfer, first it's going to the women and then it's going to the millennials. And the parents and grandparents want to get these kids involved in conversations now. And what often brings them to the table and gets them excited is investments like this. Millennials are so mission driven, and they're all about transparency, and they don't want to, invest in companies that are, the reputation is shot down and, on the front page of the newspaper for cheating clients out of something or polluting something. Millennials care so much about that it's really become a conversation that I think can bring the family together. So probably less about, are they asking different questions, and more about, where they're coming to the conversation, whether it's by themselves in a family, want to align their portfolios, with their values or not. But I would say advisors tell me 9 times out of 10, when presented with, when the family or the couple is presented with a product like this, they have some level of interest.
It's interesting you shared that, because I got a note last week. So I was requested through a client who had read my Conquering Your Money, A Woman's Guide to Business Success. They were speaking at an all-girls school, and they're like, can you send over, they'd like to buy some books, So I sent one of their head people, like a bunch of books, and then I also sent them the new book, From the Bar to the Boardroom. And I got an email back from the gentleman. He goes, I figured since we're presenting it, I ought to take a look through the book. And he's like, I read your book with my 2 daughters, my sisters in mind. And he goes, I'm so glad you wrote this. This is so important. And so I'm completely aligning with you of it's for the parents and this, generations to be teaching and sharing with and educating our coming to adult and adult children, right? So it's the millennials, a little bit, the 20s, the 30s, the teens that are coming up, of what's possible and what this is about. What do you see as far as women in finance out there? I mean, what's the demographics looking like in this world?
It's not, I don't think it's getting much better. I actually think I heard recently that the number of women getting their CFPs is down or stayed the same.
Hold on, can you share what a CFP is for our audience?
Certified Financial Planner. Yeah. So
thank you.
One of the many designations somebody could get. From where I sit, I don't see a lot of people being like me, young women. I think, especially in sales, I think sales can be a challenging road that might feel like a boys' club for sure. So it depends, I guess, which part of the profession that we're talking about. But overall, no, the numbers aren't getting better. And they've actually gone down since the 2008 crisis. believe it or not. I think that specifically looking at women and just talking anecdotally, it's not always seen as the most trustworthy industry. Can be seen as a little bit, cutthroat or a boys club, or I think we have a lot as an industry to do to change that reputation, because I personally don't feel like that at all. So I think there's a lot of misconceptions out there. And I wrote an article recently just about how it feels like you need an invite sometimes to join this industry. And that sometimes if you haven't met anyone in the industry, you might not see it as a roadmap for you. And so there's a lot of great organizations out there now that are aiming to get more young people into the industry, or aiming to get more women and other kinds of diverse groups, because it's really going to be a problem, sooner rather than later with the demographics that we have now.
Is there any organizations that you can share with our audience that they might want to Google, check out, do some research on?
Sure. InvestNet has an institute on campus where they are doing a great job in highlighting the roadmap to financial services. Because it's funny, when you ask, those in college, or even maybe getting their a graduate degree or their MBA, they don't know. They think, finance is investment banking, period. Or, they think it's just a financial advisor or a trader. They might not realize there's a lot of marketing jobs, there's advertising jobs, there's operations, there's compliance, they're not seeing all the different roadmaps. And so, I would say Google InvestNet's Institute on campus. They have great videos on YouTube, a lot of materials online, and they have a representation in many campuses across the country. So there might even be one at somebody's school.
Awesome. Any tips or things we should be staying abreast of that to continue to educate ourselves?
That's a good question. I think that, staying aware, for me, like I said, it was a shock, not being fully aware of the numbers, and until I started to read them, of the lack of women and lack of diversity at some of our favorite companies. And, to me, it's really important to be an informed consumer. So whether you're investing or just where you're shopping, there's a lot of great resources out there now that you can identify, look under the hood, and see what kind of companies are ones that you'd feel proud to shop at and proud to go to. And I think some companies are doing this so well right now, but depending on what the issues are that matter most to you, do a little bit of homework and get educated on those that you probably want to be spending your money at or invested in, and maybe those that you don't want to.
And how can people learn more about you and what you're involved in, Kelly?
I'm pretty active on LinkedIn, I have to say.
Okay.
That was a tip I actually got from one of my mentors that said, just put all of your activity on LinkedIn and you'll make great connections. And I've done that, which is hard compliance-wise with this industry. So social media-wise, I would say that's where I'd love to connect with people. I post a lot of articles, ones that I write and ones that I read. And where I'm headed next is usually on there as well. So Kelly Coyne, Coyne.
Awesome. Well, I cannot thank you from the bottom of my heart for joining me today and sharing not just a woman's perspective, but a millennial woman's perspective on the impact of women on boards and what we could learn about, what we can do, and continuing. I'll always believe education is the way to grow. One of the greatest joys for me to be able to do interviews and meet so many fabulous people with her success story is continuing to learn myself. And I hope Kelly's information today has been a great asset for many, many young women of all ages and men of all ages to actually create your strategies for your own portfolios with a high sense of education and knowledge and resources to find out how you want to show up in your values to invest for yourself, your family, and your future.
Well, thank you so much. I'm honored to be asked, and please connect anyone with me after, and we can keep the conversation going.
Let's keep the conversation alive. Please subscribe to Her Success Story. You will continue to get this series on the impact of women on boards in your inbox every Monday morning. Feel free to leave a comment. Let us know what you think of the interviews. Let us know what else you want to know, and we will bring it to you. Thank you for joining me today on Her Success Story.